You're listening to Collab Chats, a podcast from the Temple University Collaborative on Community Inclusion. The Collaborative is part of Temple University in Philadelphia, and we've spent the last 15 years focused on full and meaningful community participation of individuals with serious mental illnesses. The Collaborative receives funding as a national rehabilitation, research, and training center from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Today, I'm your guest host, Tiger Russel-Yeh, and I'll be talking with Kyra Baker. Kyra works as a community inclusion specialist and research assistant at the Collaborative. She's most recently been involved in planning an intervention for a study which utilizes Instagram to enhance campus engagement and peer support among college students with serious mental illnesses. She's also responsible for developing intervention training materials for an upcoming biking and public transportation intervention study. She's been involved in various knowledge translation activities, such as hosting this podcast, and contributing to the development of intervention manuals and documents. Kyra's research interests include self-directed care, storytelling, mental health services, religion, and exploring the relationship between the mental health system, identity, and the impact of community participation of people with serious mental illnesses on identity formation and self-concept. Over the past year, Kyra served as the center's supported education specialist in a campus-oriented distance-supported education research study. Hey Kyra, how are you today?
I'm great, Tiger. How are you?
I'm doing well. To start off, can you tell us about what supported education is?
Yeah, supported education is an evidence-based practice for assisting and supporting students with serious mental illnesses to achieve their personal educational goals. And the rationale for this service is based on research, which tells us that individuals with serious mental illnesses are much more likely to withdraw from college before completing their degree compared to the general student population. So mental health specific factors are likely to play a role, but normative factors are as well, such as problems paying tuition, poor academic preparation, like a lack of study skills, and a lack of confidence. Another normative factor is that academic success and retention have been associated with greater campus engagement, like joining clubs, attending events, and being connected to others in and outside of the classroom. Research conducted by the Collaborative suggests that college students with mental illnesses are significantly less engaged on campus compared to the general student population, and that was associated with lower graduation rates. So the feeling that others treat them differently or experiencing prejudice and discrimination because of mental health issues is one factor associated with lower campus engagement. So that's where our supported education intervention comes in. The supported ed programs vary greatly, but typically focus on academic preparation issues, illness management and crisis planning, and coping with the impacts of mental health issues throughout one's academic career. So campus engagement isn't typically a central focus of most supported ed interventions, which is one of the factors that makes our intervention study unique. A central focus of the intervention is on enhancing campus engagement, including supporting students with mental illnesses in identifying their engagement interests, helping them search for opportunities on campus, and developing natural support systems. The second unique factor of this intervention is that it's designed to reach students at college campuses across the country by using distance communication technologies so that you can reach students where in-person supported ed programs might not exist.
So from what I know, there's a core 5 areas of this campus engagement-oriented supported education. Could you tell me about these and what they are specifically?
Yeah. So the 5 core areas were identified throughout the course of the intervention and are outlined in our soon-to-be-released Campus Engagement-Oriented Supported Education Manual. The first area, naturally, is campus engagement. So the supported education specialist, I'm just going to say SES, supports the student to identify and access campus services and resources like recreation, student life, and student organizations, which can increase student satisfaction with their college experience. And the second core area is academic achievement. So this area includes things like study skills, accommodations, homework completion, organization and time management, attendance, and working with other students. The third area, which I found to be very common among most of the students I worked with, is natural support systems. So this refers to the development of a social network of supportive people who don't have a formal or paid relationship with the student. So these would be social contacts which are naturally occurring, like friends, family, coworkers, faculty, classmates, rather than those whose role is to provide services to the student, like caseworkers or therapists or a supported education specialist.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah. And the fourth area is interpersonal relationships. So this focuses on confident and effective interactions with administrators, faculty, staff, fellow students, friends, family, coworkers, roommates is a big one, and any other people whom the student interacts with in relation to their academic pursuits. And needs in this area might be related to self-advocacy and natural support systems. So there's a lot of overlap within all of the core areas. And the final area is self-advocacy. So the SES focuses on the student's ability to speak confidently and effectively on their own behalf to administrators, faculty and staff, and other people within the university and broader community in order to gain access to needed resources and services. This area usually came up when students experienced discrimination and problems with faculty concerning accommodations.
Could you explain the relationship between this supported education specialist and the student?
Yeah, so I like to think of it as a formal relationship that's also casual and relatable. Every student is different in terms of meeting frequency and type of communication. I worked with one student, as an example, who only wanted to talk on the phone, which worked for her because she was often running from place to place in her car or whatever, and it made it more convenient for her. With most students, we'd have a face-to-face meeting over Zoom or Skype or FaceTime a couple of times a month with texting and email in between. For this intervention, it was all distance communication. So we'd always be meeting online. So I worked with students all across the country. Most of the students weren't in Philadelphia at all. And that was one of the things that made this intervention study unique.
Relating to that, how accessible are these specialists?
In terms of finding a supported education specialist, it's not something that is easily found at this point. I think that one of the goals of this study was to prove the effectiveness of this role and hopefully to make this a more accessible service for students. And I think that could exist in a variety of ways. I do know that I believe it's Boston University has a supported education program. However, from the research I've done into existing supported education programs, I think there would be a financial barrier to a lot of students accessing this service.
Yeah, so it really requires some more funding from the university.
Right.
Okay.
Or whomever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as like being accessible to individual students as a supported education specialist, I think that the SES should aim to be as accessible as possible. For instance, I rarely met with students on a weekend day, but regularly met with a few students in the evenings. And I would occasionally receive a text message or some kind of communication over a weekend, which I would respond to. You really want to be accommodating to the students' schedules and needs, because the service won't be effective if you're like, oh, it's 5 o'clock on a Tuesday, I can't answer your text right now, you know? Yeah. So I tried to be accessible in multiple ways and always let students know if there would be a time when I was out of town or would be unreachable.
Okay, so when you begin this process of looking into how these students need help, what areas they need help in, how do you first approach addressing their individual needs?
Well, there's a sort of intake and assessment period. For me, that was a little bit different because I came into this role after someone had already been working with the students. So I came into it with students who had already gone through that process. Yeah. So every student will have a different set of needs and a different set of circumstances. I worked with traditional aged college students, a couple of grad students, a couple of PhD students. So depending on where someone's stage of life is, their needs are going to be different.
So a huge part of your approach to supported education is the importance of campus engagement and, this natural support group. So for an example, you work with a lot of undergraduate students and you want to get them involved on campus, but I'm wondering how you do this for a lot of those students who might be less willing to do so or socially anxious.
Yeah, I'm very glad you asked that question. I could talk about a couple of experiences with a couple of students that I worked with. I'm going to talk about this student. I'll call her Carrie. That is not her real name. When I first started working with her, I think it was our very first meeting, I, asked her like, well, what kind of stuff do you like to do? What's interesting to you? And she became very upset. And she said, I don't do anything because I don't have anyone to do things with.
Yeah.
So anytime we talked about campus engagement, it would come back to, I don't have any friends. I don't have anything to do, and I'm afraid to do things on my own.
And that's a difficult problem to approach.
It is, yes.
SES.
For sure. I mean, she was resistant to, even looking into leisure opportunities or things she was interested in because it was always so connected with her lack of natural supports and a lack of friendships. So I then kind of took some steps back and sort of presented this hypothetical situation to her. I was like, okay, just imagine if you have people, if you have a group that's yours, what would you like to do? And that sort of lifted this pressure. And she listed all of these things that she wanted to do. She was interested in horticulture. She wanted to take Zumba classes. She loved art. And she just lit up when she was talking about these things she liked to do. And I chose to kind of give it a while before bringing the natural support aspect back into it. So what we did was we focused on campus engagement. She was just starting her fall semester. And I asked her, what about some things you can get involved in, and she was, again, very resistant because she didn't have people to go with. But then in one of our meetings, we looked at her school's website and she found a couple of, activities and opportunities that she was interested in. And our next meeting, I think, was at the end of her first or second week of her semester. And I was kind of blown away. She was like, I volunteered for these 2 events. I decided to volunteer for events that would give me a job. So she knew that having an activity to do would relieve her anxiety if she had a task. So she started going to things independently. And she would always say, I'm so nervous, I'm so uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it. So after a while of Carrie independently going to campus events, I then again brought up, okay, how about some friends? How about some people to hang out with? And it was again met with some resistance, but we sort of went through these different steps of what goes into being a friend and how do you make friends? There isn't a guidebook for how to make friends.
Yeah, and I actually think earlier you were talking about kind of this visualization, and I think that's a really good place to start because I really think once you do that, it kind of brings you a step closer to reality, and it's a bit easier to consume once you've kind of seen it through in your own mind,
Yeah, exactly. So with Carrie, we went back to this sort of hypothetical situation. And I was like, what do you think makes a good friend? What qualities are you looking for in someone? And then I also asked her, what do you think makes you a good friend to someone else? It's really, really important to ask people how they believe they can support others. That's very, very valuable. So after a while of sort of, hypothetically going into this friendship, she said that there was a person in her class who she talked to every single day and got along great with. And I was like, oh, well, what about inviting this person out? And she was like, I am very uncomfortable with that. I don't know, That
can be scary.
It is.
I mean, you never know what people are going to say. And, everyone, especially in college, people are busy. So you don't know if they're kind of being like, oh, I can't go because I'm studying or
or you might have, and I think a lot of people will assume they already have friends and,
or they're busy.
But she then came up with this whole plan. She found an event on campus that had an activity. I think it had something to do with plants. And she invited this classmate of hers after class one day. It was just like, hey, would you like to go to this thing with me? And her classmate was like, yeah. And they went. And then when she was reporting back to me, when she was telling me what happened, she was just like, yeah, she said she'd go. And I was like, okay. And she actually asked another person to go, which was difficult for her. It was exciting, but she was like, oh, wait, I didn't plan for this.
Yeah, that's another thing.
So they went to this one event, and then she was like, and then we kept hanging out after. We went to get food and stuff. And the way she talked about her experience doing this was, she said that she felt really proud of herself. And I think that was coming from this was her main barrier. Natural supports was her main barrier to engagement. And she wanted to have a support system so badly. So she would always reiterate, I am very uncomfortable with this. but I am going to do this.
Yeah, but that's so great.
That
That's
was really
such
admirable.
a step in the right direction to just, confront your fear like that and just go for it.
Yeah. And there was another student I worked with too, who I will call Tanya, not her real name. And she had a similar situation as Carrie. And she was actually a senior. She was about to graduate. And she said, when I brought up, campus engagement and things you like to do with her, and campus engagement covers a wide swath of things. It could be as simple as going to the library to study, or going to the rec center to work out, or going to events. It's something other than staying in your dorm room. So I asked Tanya about these things, and she said, well, no, I hate going to the library, because when I go, I just see groups of people there, and it reminds me that I'm a senior and I have not made any friends. So it was a similar trajectory as what I did with Carrie, because we sort of went back and was like, okay, just think about the things you're interested in, because she would look into these things. She was like, well, I'm not going to do any of this. I'm too uncomfortable.
Then what happens is you tend to isolate yourself.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And that's actually a pattern I see a lot of people go through in college, and I go through it myself all the time at school, where you have so much work, you have so much stuff you're doing that you can go like 2 days without seeing or communicating with anyone.
Yeah.
You don't even realize, and you have these kind of like weird lingering feelings of like loneliness building up.
Yeah.
You don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very common with a lot of people, even those who have great support systems. I personally think I have a very good support system, but I forget to utilize that and reach out to people when I have all this crazy stuff and work going on, and that can really just build up,
Right, yeah, that's sort of like isolating, and it can be hard to sort of remind yourself of, well, who in my life can I reach out to at this time? Or also, college is so stressful and so busy, and if you're a person who deals with perfectionism or just wants to do your work all the time, it can be hard to maintain your relationships. There are barriers.
It's difficult. There are barriers. Sometimes you're exhausted, you stayed up all night, or it's hard to fit in the schedule.
Definitely. So there's another student that I worked with very regularly called, fake name again, Jasmine. And we worked a bit on natural supports with her, but what ended up being the focus was academic achievement. It would fall into that core area, that domain of academic achievement. And I would say that every other core area overlapped with this academic achievement area. In Jasmine's case, she had a couple of hospitalizations in the very beginning of a semester. So before targeting campus engagement or natural supports, we kind of just came up with a plan that she connected with the Office of Disability Services. She connected with the Student Writing Center. She got tutoring. She came up with a plan to catch up with her coursework. She got her accommodations in place. So that was set. And that was really important for that to be set.
Yeah, that's brutal. I mean, in the middle of a college semester to be hospitalized.
Yeah.
2 days can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's
for some students, and throw them off completely with their work schedule.
Right, yeah. And, throughout the academic year, Jasmine really struggled with study skills, organization, and time management. And, we would work together, and she had natural supports. She would be like, I'll study with my roommate. I'll do this. But then it would keep ending up that she was like, it didn't work out. I didn't do any of my work. I didn't study. So I thought, okay, let's take some steps back again. For a supported education specialist, if something's not working, it's like, okay, pull back and try something else. So what we did was we talked about her study habits and her environment. We talked about what time of day she feels most alert, which was the afternoon. We talked about if she studies better in her dorm room or in the library. She said, oh yeah, I've been studying in my dorm room all the time, but not studying because I'm in my room.
I can never study in my room.
Yeah, it's difficult.
The environment matters so much.
It does, yeah. So then she said, I can study in the living room or I can go to the library. And then it was like, okay, well, what other self-care activities have you engaged in before studying? And she was like, oh, I always forget to eat. So it was
that's a big one.
sort of like came up with this plan that was based on preparing her environment and making sure that these other needs were met in order for her to get into this space of studying. And that turned out to be really effective with her.
I do something similar. Like for me, before I start studying, if I know I have 4 to 6 hours of studying for an exam or something, I cannot do it unless I sit down and play video games for 30 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, no, I just cannot. That's just what I have to do.
That's the start?
I do that, get in the zone, and then I can just study.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's just my thing. Everyone's different. You
know.
For some people, it's just making sure they eat a meal or, hang out with some friends before. But
yeah. I like to have absolute silence and a distraction-free environment.
Oh, that as well.
Some people like being in a busy coffee shop or library, so.
Yeah. No, where I study, it's this place called the Stacks. It's part of the graduate library, and it looks like a jail cell. And so many people don't like it. They like to go to the regular undergraduate library, but there's always people talking and eating and stuff. You're hearing people chewing behind you. I can't deal with that, so I have to go in this it's just like a little white box with a desk. It's just completely silent, distraction free.
Yeah, that sounds like my kind of thing too. I also wanted to talk about connecting students with existing resources. That's a big part of the SES role. So if a student identified a need or an interest, it was always first okay, what exists on your campus?
Yeah.
So, there would be different resources. One student got connected with a STEM group for women. Another student became involved in an LGBTQ group. A lot of times students don't know what's available to them, as well as offices of disability services. A lot of students don't realize that, accommodations are available to them. And so developing relationships with the Office of Disability Services was a pretty big thing as well.
Fortunately, as resources go, each year we're seeing more and more funding put into these and more popping up, whether it's, student run or counseling centers.
Yeah.
So, that's been great.
Yeah. I'm really interested in those student run programs. I think the peer sort of programs go right into natural supports.
Yeah, absolutely. And after you take the steps to figure out how you're going to meet the students' needs, how do you follow through and make sure that they're following the plan you've laid out together?
I love this question, and I will tell you why. So any plan that has been laid out is not laid out by me. One of the most important parts of supported education is that it's really directed by the student. So myself as the specialist, I might offer some prompting and guide them through this plan, but it really is chosen and directed by the student. So there's that period of getting to know someone and developing a rapport and everything. And we would develop goal sheets and I would go through that with students, but it was really a partnership. And I would say that if someone was in charge of laying out a plan, it was always the student. So it was really self-directed in that way. Also, some people might not follow through as much as others. Yeah. Some students were much more engaged and much more, I think, connected with their own plan than other students.
And depending on that, that's how much you're going to be, more or less engaged, right? I think, I read about one example where you were calling one student every morning or
wake up call. Wake up call.
One of the SESs was calling one student every morning so they'd wake up.
Yeah, that was Jasmine because she had a natural support giving her a wake up call. She had trouble waking up for class, and I think her friend went on vacation or something, and she was just like, I can't wake up. I can sleep through my alarm. So I was like, all right, I'll just give you a call at this time. Yeah. And I was calling her like, hey. And she's like, okay, we can get off the phone.
That works, but that's impressive.
It was, she said, near the end of the intervention, she said that made a huge difference for her. So it's interesting to know that something that seems so simple is actually a huge support for someone.
So going back to the accessibility of these services, I was wondering if students that, may not have a serious mental illness, students who might just be having difficulties with their classes, with their relationships, just anything in life, are they able to seek help in these services? Or?
I think that's a really great question. For our intervention study, we focused on offering the service to students who had a diagnosis of a serious mental illness. So that was either major depression, a bipolar disorder, or a schizophrenia spectrum disorder. And that's also what the collaborative receives funding for. That's the population that we work with. I would love to see this service available to anyone and everyone. There's a lot of issues in terms of diagnostics. Someone might be experiencing mental distress or a mental health problem and not have received an official diagnosis. So I think it would be really, really great to have this service available to anyone who's experiencing anything, whether they've received a diagnosis or not.
No, I think that would be great, but of course that would just take a lot more funding. I'm sure, there's not enough SES.
I mean, maybe there's a way for students to create a sort of peer-supported education program, Like, that would be so cool, I think.
Yeah, well...
What do you think?
We actually have those where I go. I go to University of Michigan, and I am actually one of the student leaders of such a peer support organization.
That's awesome. Can you tell us about that?
So it's called Wolverine Support Network. And it's a student-run mental health org at U of M, and it's based around the peer support model. So we launched around 2015. It was before my time there. And it's basically, there are these weekly group meetings where you have this kind of like therapeutic group dialogue, and it's led through 1 to 2 leaders. The concept of the peer support model is receiving support through your peers, like other students, other people your age, because there's actually been a ton of research that shows when people are in distress or people are dealing with things, they're way more likely to go to their peers first before anyone else. So it's kind of the idea of, so why don't we give these peers the tools to help their friends, their classmates, whoever. And it's a system that works very, very well because it's a lot more comforting than some of the other resources that are typically available in high school, college, or even graduate school.
Right. And it's not hierarchical because everyone's a peer.
There's no hierarchy. It's just a super comfortable setting where the meetings are held too. So at Michigan, we have weekly groups. So we meet once a week. It works completely according to the individual schedule. And we have like 30 plus groups each semester. So yeah, there's a lot of variety. It really works with any schedule. So it's highly accessible, which is great. We've really just taken off the last couple years, and we actually have branched out to a few other schools using our same model, which is, these weekly groups, and then something else I didn't get into yet. We also have these bi-weekly community events that we call Kickback Fridays. And these are really where like other students at U of M who might not be a part of Wolverine Support Network or might not be in a group can just join in and like hang out. And it's that peer support model again, where like everyone's just there to like be friendly, make friends, support each other. Yeah, it's a really just great system.
And it's open to everyone.
Yeah. And that's the big part of it.
Great.
It's a mental health organization. So we're all about removing stigmas, supporting those with serious mental illnesses. And, we have a lot of people who have those, but also we're just open to anyone. I mean, we really run through the concept that like everyone kind of needs peer support, or everyone should want it at least, because it's such a great thing.
I have a question for you, because it sounds like you've so much experience in your role as a leader with WSN. So we're located at Temple University. If Temple were to start this kind of group, what suggestions would you have?
Oh, for a student?
Yeah, for a student-run group. If Temple were to start something that mirrors WSN.
I think anyone, if your college doesn't have a resource like this, you should absolutely implement it. Maybe reach out to someone. You can go to, I think it's thesupportnetwork.org or supportnetwork.org. You can reach out to someone through there about, starting an affiliate at your school. And then, if that's working out, go to someone in administration and see how much backing you can get to get it started up.
I know that it's peer run, but do you have any administrators or faculty involved or anyone sort of higher up that's advocating for this group to exist and be maintained?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I was talking before about being a peer, but having these tools to help people. And as leaders, we actually receive education in our weekly meetings. And we have a therapist from the counseling and psychological services who comes every week and, will guide us through lessons on how to facilitate this kind of therapeutic dialogue and, how to work with people who may have mental illnesses.
So the therapist provides the peers with training to offer it.
The group leaders with training.
Okay.
And the great thing about that is we can, spread that to all of our friends and to the Michigan community. And that's really, one of the end goals here also is to really destigmatize mental health, because there's all these organizations, but it's still always going to be a big issue on college campuses. I think at Michigan, WSN has such a big presence. If you really ask any student who goes to Michigan, and there's a whole lot of them, they know about Wolverine Support Network, or they know someone in it, and it's really just gaining a lot of respect. So that's great. Yeah.
That's awesome. I would love to see that happen on every college campus. Yeah. It's really great that you're involved in that and, can share your expertise and experience.
Yeah. And in addition to our therapist from CAPS, we also do have weekly guest speakers. We had someone who's from the LGBTQ community who helped us with community inclusion and how to make sure everyone feels comfortable, who's in WSN and really working on the diversity in the program. And, that's another great resource. We actually did a really fun one towards the end of the year. That was like a meditation session. So
that's awesome.
I've actually been using it a bit now. So I'm a big fan.
I've just started meditating a bit myself. I would have liked to be in that training with that guest speaker.
I mean, what really makes WSN so unique and the support model is how convenient it is. We have all these groups each week. There's always plenty of room to join a group. I mean, a group will usually have like 10 to 12 students, and 30 of those, that's a 400, 500 something active members each semester.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. And, we have plenty of rooms around campus to utilize for the meetings.
So I looked up WSN, and you have a lot of online resources too. Like I noticed that there's a blog with students studying abroad and studying abroad while, managing mental health issues. And it just seems like a very authentic, accessible resource.
It's really authentic. It's great. I mean, I've been a leader for a semester, so I don't know everyone too well, but all the people I've met there so honestly care about this cause, care about mental health. And it's such an empowering, great community. That's another thing that's unique about WSN that I think a lot more student-run and college organizations should implement is like directly impacting students. There's a lot of organizations that are doing awesome things. They're educating, they're destigmatizing mental health. But something I think we need to see more of are these peer support models that are, directly impacting students through stuff like therapeutic dialogue and these weekly meetings.
Yeah. Maybe when you go back in the fall, you can take some of these core areas of supported education and adapt it to a sort of like peer supported education.
Yeah, model. I think that would be a very interesting idea as well. And this is another thing that's kind of unique to Temple right now, this campus engagement oriented supported education. And I think that would be something that should definitely spread to other universities as well.
Yeah, it would be great to see. The WSN and the peer support model, I think that's so awesome. And I would love to see more of that on campuses everywhere. And I'm so glad that you shared your experiences.
Thanks so much for answering all of my questions. This was all very informative. And I really do hope so. I mean, that's the end goal for us, to really just spread this support model around the country and stuff.
Yeah, I wish you all the best with your academic career and beyond. I'm so glad we had the opportunity to meet, and I look forward to hearing any updates, about WSN or how peer support is spreading throughout campuses.
Yeah, thanks. It was great talking to you, and I'm excited to hear about what the collaborative does in the future and how supported ed evolves.
Awesome. Thanks, Tiger.
Collab Chats is a knowledge translation activity developed by the Rehabilitation Research and Training Center on community living and participation for individuals with serious mental illnesses. To learn more about the work that we do, visit our website at tucollaborative.org. You can find us on Facebook at Temple University Collaborative on Community Inclusion and on Instagram and Twitter at TUCollab. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to discuss it with us, email us at tucollab@temple.edu. Funding for this podcast and support for the Rehabilitation Research and Training Center on Community Living and Participation for Individuals with Serious Mental Illnesses comes from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. The contents of this podcast do not necessarily represent the policies of NIDLR, ACL, HHS, and you should not assume endorsement by the U.S. federal government.